You're a Mongol sapper crouching beneath a thick cowhide screen that has kept you alive through a dozen sieges, chipping methodically at Kaifeng's massive stone wall with your iron chisel. The rhythmic tap, tap, tap echoes in the small space you and your comrades have carved into the wall's base. Around you, dozens of other sappers work in their own protective niches, safe from arrows, safe from the boiling oil the defenders pour down from above, hidden from direct sight. The leather shelter overhead is 3 layers thick, oxhide cured and hardened. Proof against anything those desperate Jin bastards can throw down. You've done this 100 times in 100 cities across Asia. You've torn down walls in Persia, in the Khwarezmian Empire, across the steppes. The technique never fails. Dig under the wall, prop it up with timber, set the timber on fire. Watch the whole section collapse. Simple, effective, unstoppable. This wall will fall like all the others. It always does. Then you hear it, a strange hissing sound growing rapidly louder, like a giant snake descending from heaven. Something metallic scraping against stone above you. You look up instinctively just as an iron sphere the size of a man's head appears through a gap in your protective screen, suspended on a heavy chain, lowered deliberately by the defenders above. Someone screams a warning, but there's nowhere to run. The tunnel is too narrow. The sphere is already here, swinging slightly, and you can hear something burning inside it with a sound like angry wasps. The sphere detonates with a sound like the sky splitting open, like heaven itself tearing apart. But it's not just the noise, though. The blast is so loud your ears stop working immediately, replaced by a high-pitched ringing that will last for days if you survive. The iron casing doesn't just burst or crack. It shatters into hundreds of razor-sharp fragments, traveling faster than arrows, faster than anything you've ever seen. The cowhide screen that has protected you through years of siege warfare disintegrates like paper. The fragments, jagged pieces of cast iron, still hot from the explosion, tear through your armor, through your flesh, through bone. You don't even have time to understand what's happening before everything goes dark. When the smoke finally clears and the Jin defenders peer down from their walls, there's nothing left of the Mongol sappers or their shelter. Not even recognizable pieces. Just a scorched crater, twisted metal, and a red stain on the stones. The Mongols standing further back, beyond the blast radius, stare in shocked silence. They have conquered from Korea to the gates of Vienna. They have faced every weapon the world can devise: crossbows, Greek fire, massed archers, armored elephants. But they have never, ever seen anything like this. And the Jin defenders above have dozens more of these iron demons waiting. Before we dive into the siege that introduced fragmentation weapons to warfare and changed military history forever, smash that like button and subscribe to Maproom Battles for the battles that actually decided how wars are fought. Comment, where are you watching from right now? The year is 1232 AD, and the greatest military machine in human history, the Mongol Empire that has crushed every opponent, conquered territories larger than Rome ever dreamed of, created the largest contiguous land empire the world has ever seen, has met a technological wall it cannot break. This is the story of how revolutionary weapons technology can change the entire calculus of warfare, how innovation can hold back seemingly unstoppable force, and how the birth of explosive fragmentation weapons at Kaifeng would eventually put guns in the hands of every soldier on Earth. Let's go back to understand how we arrived at this moment. The Mongol Empire, led by Ögedei Khan, third son of Genghis Khan, elected Great Khan in 1229, has been locked in a grinding war with the Jurchen Jin dynasty of northern China for 21 years. This isn't a quick conquest. This is generational warfare. The conflict began under Genghis Khan himself in 1211. Beijing fell to Mongol forces in 1215 after a brutal siege. The Jin court, recognizing that their northern capital was indefensible against the Mongol tide, relocated their government south to Kaifeng in Henan province, a massive, heavily fortified city protected by some of the strongest walls in China. For 2 decades after Beijing's fall, the war ground on in a pattern that favored neither side decisively. The Mongols controlled the open countryside, their cavalry supremacy unchallenged in field battles. But Chinese cities, with their sophisticated fortifications, remained stubbornly resistant. Each siege was a costly, time-consuming affair. But by 1230, the strategic situation had shifted dramatically in the Mongols' favor. They had learned. That's the terrifying thing about the Mongol military system. It adapted with ruthless efficiency. The Mongols had perfected the art of siege warfare by doing something most conquerors never thought to do. They learned from their enemies. When they captured cities, they didn't just loot and burn. They captured Chinese and Persian engineers, specialists in siegecraft, mathematics, metallurgy. They forced these experts to teach Mongol commanders how to build trebuchets, siege towers, battering rams. They learned mining techniques for undermining walls. They studied the defensive architecture of every city they besieged and cataloged weaknesses. By 1232, the Mongols possessed perhaps the most sophisticated siege warfare capability in the world, combining Central Asian mobility with Chinese engineering expertise and Persian metallurgical knowledge. Leading the Mongol forces was Subutai, and if you don't know that name, you should. This man is one of the greatest military commanders in human history, though he's barely remembered in the West. Subutai was a veteran of campaigns, stretching from Korea in the east to the gates of Vienna in the west. He had defeated the Rus princes at the Battle of Kalka River. He had orchestrated the destruction of the Khwarezmian Empire. He had led reconnaissance expeditions into Eastern Europe that terrified kingdoms thousands of miles from Mongolia. This was not some inexperienced general trying siege warfare for the first time. This was an architect of victories that reshaped the entire map of Eurasia. In 1232, 1231, 2 Mongol armies under Ögedei, Khan himself and his brother Tolui, had defeated the main Jin field army at the Battle of Sanfongshan. It was a catastrophic defeat for the Jin, tens of thousands killed, their mobile forces shattered, their ability to relieve besieged cities destroyed. But then both Khan brothers fell seriously ill, probably from disease contracted during the campaign. Tolui died from his illness. Ögedei survived, but was too weak to continue active command. Supreme command of the Kaifeng operation passed to Subutai, and he approached it with the methodical precision that characterized all his campaigns. On April 8th, 1232, his forces surrounded Kaifeng completely. constructing elaborate siege lines with a perimeter stretching an astounding 87 kilometers around the massive city. This wasn't a loose blockade, this was systematic encirclement with fortified positions, supply depots, communications networks. The Mongols had learned from Roman and Chinese siege doctrine. They built a city of their own around Kaifeng, designed to starve it into submission. Inside Kaifeng's walls, over 1 million people. That number isn't exaggeration or ancient source inflation. Kaifeng was one of the largest cities in the world at this time, comparable to Baghdad or Constantinople. The population included normal residents, the Jin imperial court, refugees who had fled there ahead of the Mongol advance, and approximately 40,000 trained defenders under the command of Emperor Aizong. Standard Mongol siege doctrine, refined through decades of experience, called for systematic reduction through multiple pressure points. First, complete isolation. Cut off all supply routes, all communications, all hope of relief. Second, psychological warfare. Parade captives. Execute prisoners within sight of the walls. Spread rumors of plague and betrayal. Third, physical bombardment. Use captured trebuchets to hurl stones, burning materials, occasionally diseased corpses over the walls to spread terror and disease. Fourth, engineering warfare. Mine under the walls, tunnels, undermine foundations. Fifth, weight. Starvation, disease, and despair would do most of the work. Eventually, the city would open its gates or collapse from within. Subutai had executed this playbook countless times across Asia and Eastern Europe. Cities that resisted faced total annihilation, as an example to others. Cities that surrendered quickly sometimes received mercy. The calculus was brutally simple. Make resistance so costly that surrender becomes the rational choice. But Kaifeng's defenders possessed something that would fundamentally disrupt this ancient equation. Gunpowder. Now, gunpowder itself was not new. In 1232, it had been known in China for centuries, since at least the 9th century Tang dynasty. Chinese alchemists had discovered that mixing sulfur, charcoal, and saltpeter potassium nitrate in the right proportions created a substance that burned with explosive force. By the 11th century, gunpowder weapons had appeared on Chinese battlefields. Fire arrows, regular arrows, with small packets of gunpowder attached, had been used to spread fire and terror. Soft shell bombs made of paper or bamboo packed with gunpowder had been thrown or launched from catapults. These early gunpowder weapons were primarily psychological tools. They made terrifying noises. They created impressive flashes of fire and clouds of smoke. They could start fires in enemy camps or on wooden siege equipment. But they rarely killed in significant numbers. A paper or bamboo bomb would burst with a loud bang and a flash, scaring horses and unnerving soldiers. But the actual lethality was limited. The explosion dissipated quickly into the air. The casing material was too weak to contain pressure, so there was no fragmentation effect. These were terror weapons, designed to frighten rather than kill efficiently. The Jin engineers and military specialists defending Kaifeng in 1232 had made a critical modification that would change warfare forever, that would eventually lead directly to hand grenades, artillery shells, and every explosive fragmentation weapon used in modern combat. They put the gunpowder inside cast iron, The weapon was called the Zentianlei, which translates as heaven-shaking thunder, or more commonly in English sources as the thunder crash bomb. The name barely captures what it actually was: the world's first true fragmentation weapon. Let's understand the physics, because the physics are what made this revolutionary. When you pack gunpowder into a paper or bamboo container and ignite it, the burning powder produces hot gas very rapidly. The pressure inside the container rises immediately. But paper and bamboo are weak materials. They rupture almost instantly under even modest pressure. The container tears open. The gas escapes in a flash. You get fire and smoke and noise. And that's it. The explosion is over in a fraction of a second, dissipated harmlessly into the atmosphere. Cast iron is completely different. Iron has immense tensile strength. When gunpowder explodes inside a cast iron sphere, the gas cannot escape immediately. The pressure builds and builds, hundreds of times atmospheric pressure concentrating inside a confined space. The temperature spikes to thousands of degrees. The iron walls of the sphere resist and resist, containing that enormous pressure for a critical fraction of a second, longer than soft materials could. Then the metal reaches its failure point. And when cast iron fails under extreme internal pressure, it doesn't just crack or tear. It shatters catastrophically into hundreds of jagged, irregular fragments. Those fragments are accelerated outward by the explosion to lethal velocities comparable to or exceeding arrow speeds. They fly in all directions simultaneously, creating a kill radius far larger than the bomb itself. This is fragmentation, the principle that would dominate explosive weapons design for the next 800 years and counting. The thunder crash bombs used at Kaifeng were devastating beyond anything the Mongols had encountered. Eyewitness accounts, recorded in Chinese historical sources, state that the explosions could be heard clearly from 30 miles away, a testament to the acoustic shock wave these weapons produced. The blast radius, the area where the explosion and fragmentation were lethal, extended roughly 1/16 of an acre. That might not sound huge, but in the confined spaces where siege warfare occurred, it was catastrophic. A single bomb could kill or wound dozens of men packed together. The iron shards could penetrate Mongol lamellar armor completely. Lamellar armor, small iron or leather plates laced together, was specifically designed to stop arrows and sword cuts. It was excellent protection against conventional weapons. But high-velocity iron fragments, irregular and tumbling, could punch through the gaps between plates or simply penetrate them through sheer kinetic energy. Horses and men alike were killed by the fragmentation, often in grotesque ways. The Jin defenders deployed these weapons with sophisticated tactical awareness. When Mongol siege engines trebuchets, Siege towers, battering rams approached the walls, Jin defenders would launch thunder crash bombs from their own trebuchets, turning siege warfare into a kind of artillery duel. A well-placed bomb could obliterate an expensive, laboriously constructed siege engine in seconds, killing the engineers operating it. When Mongol sappers tried to mine the walls, the classic undermining technique where you dig a tunnel beneath the fortification, prop it up with wooden supports, then burn the supports to collapse the wall, Jin defenders had a particularly cruel countermeasure. They would tie heavy iron chains to the thunder crash bombs and carefully lower them through gaps in the fortifications directly into the mining tunnels where the sappers worked. The legendary Mongol cowhide, screens thick, multi-layered leather shelters that had protected engineering teams at dozens of previous sieges, that were designed to stop stones, arrows, and burning oil were shredded like paper by the iron fragments. Historical sources from both Chinese and later Mongol accounts note with evident horror that after such attacks in the confined space of a mining tunnel, not even traces of the victims remained. The explosion in the enclosed space, combined with the fragmentation, essentially vaporized human bodies. But the Jin arsenal at Kaifeng contained a second revolutionary weapon that was in some ways even more terrifying. In close combat, the flying fire lance Fei Hua Qiang. These were bamboo or sometimes thick paper tubes, over 2 feet long, packed tightly with a carefully formulated mixture gunpowder, sulfur, charcoal, saltpeter, small iron fragments, and ground porcelain shards. One end was sealed. The other end was open with a fuse. When ignited by touching the fuse to hot coals, the burning mixture inside didn't explode all at once like a bomb. Instead, it burned progressively from the sealed end toward the open end, and the pressure forced the burning material out of the tube in a sustained jet. The result was a weapon that shot streams of flame over 10 feet long, essentially a proto-flamethrower, a weapon concept that wouldn't reappear in Western arsenals until World War I, 7 centuries later. But it wasn't just flame. The iron fragments and porcelain shards packed into the mixture were also expelled in the jet, creating burning shrapnel that could embed itself in flesh and continue burning. Jin infantry wielded these fire lances like flaming shotguns. Each soldier assigned to fire lance duty carried a small iron pot filled with hot coals, kept burning constantly, to ignite the fuses when needed. The tactical employment was devastating against massed troops at close range. In one engagement during the siege, 450 Jin troops armed with fire lances launched a coordinated surprise night raid directly into the Mongol camp. The darkness, the confusion, the sudden eruption of 10-foot jets of flame in all directions, the screaming of men and horses burning the raid killed hundreds of Mongols before the defenders could organize any coherent response. The attackers melted back into Kaifeng before dawn, having inflicted casualties far out of proportion to their numbers. The combination of thunder crash bombs and flying fire lances created a psychological impact that went far beyond their actual kill counts. The history of Jinjinshi, one of the official dynastic histories compiled later, explicitly records that these 2 weapons were the only Jin weapons the Mongols genuinely feared. Think about what that means. These were not the invincible horse archers who had crushed the Rus princes, who had destroyed the Khwarezmian Empire, who had ridden through Hungary and Poland, spreading terror. In front of Kaifeng's walls, they became infantrymen, facing weapons that turned their protective equipment into liabilities and made approaching the fortifications suicidal. The Mongols excelled at adaptation, but you can't adapt psychology easily. When your protective screen, the thing that has kept you alive through a dozen sieges, can be shredded by an invisible explosion. When approaching the walls means facing jets of fire that burn through armor, the calculus of courage changes. Subutai recognized the tactical problem immediately. He could not order direct assaults against walls defended by these weapons without accepting catastrophic casualties that would cripple his army's effectiveness in future campaigns. The Mongol military system relied heavily on veteran soldiers who survived multiple campaigns, accumulated experience, and formed the professional core of the army. Feeding them into a meat grinder at Kaifeng made no strategic sense. So Subutai did what great commanders do. When faced with an unsolvable tactical problem, he changed the approach entirely. If he couldn't assault directly, he would tighten the blockade to inhuman perfection and let starvation, disease, and time do what explosives couldn't. The siege dragged on through the brutal summer of 1232. Temperatures in Henan province soar in summer, and the sanitation situation inside a city of over 1 million people under siege conditions deteriorated rapidly. Inside Kaifeng's walls, the situation became progressively more desperate with each passing week. Food supplies that had seemed adequate when the siege began dwindled alarmingly. The Jin government imposed strict rationing, but feeding 1 million people, even on starvation rations, requires enormous quantities of grain that simply didn't exist. Markets that had once sold rice, vegetables, meat, now sold anything remotely edible: tree bark, leather boiled into gelatin, rats, insects. Prices for actual food became astronomical. Only the wealthy and well-connected could afford to eat. The poor starved in the streets. Then plague arrived. In densely packed populations under siege stress, with deteriorating sanitation, epidemic disease is almost inevitable. The exact nature of the plague isn't specified in historical sources. It could have been typhus, dysentery, typhoid fever, any of the killers that thrive in such conditions. Bodies accumulated faster than they could be buried. The death toll climbed into the tens of thousands, possibly higher. The psychological strain was immense. People could see the Mongol siege lines from the walls, a ring of enemy camps surrounding them completely, cutting off all hope of relief or escape. Everyone understood intellectually that the Mongol strategy was simply to wait for the city to destroy itself from within. And there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. By late 1232, as summer gave way to a harsh winter that brought new suffering, Emperor Aizong faced the brutal reality that no ruler wants to confront. His capital was doomed. The Jin dynasty itself might survive if the imperial court escaped to fight another day. But Kaifeng could not be held indefinitely. In a decision that was both pragmatic and deeply controversial, Aizong fled the city under cover of darkness with his closest advisors and whatever portable wealth they could carry. They escaped south to Kaizhou, another fortified city. Smaller, but still defensible. The flight of the emperor shattered what remained of civilian morale inside Kaifeng. If even the Son of Heaven himself had abandoned the city, what hope remained? Command of Kaifeng's defense fell to General Qili Dao, a loyal officer tasked with the impossible: negotiate surrender terms that might preserve some remnant of dignity and prevent total massacre. The Mongols had a well-earned reputation for savagery toward cities that resisted too long. Entire populations had been slaughtered as examples. On May 29th, 1233, over 13 months after the siege had begun, over a year of bombardment and starvation and disease, General Qi opened Kaifeng's gates and surrendered the city to Subutai. The siege was over. The human cost was catastrophic. Estimates suggest that hundreds of thousands of Kaifeng's population had died during the siege from starvation, disease, and bombardment. The city that surrendered was a hollow shell of what it had been. The Jin dynasty itself survived for 2 more years, in increasingly desperate circumstances. In 1234, combined Mongol and Song dynasty forces, the Mongols had allied with the Song against their mutual Jin enemy captured Keijo. Emperor Aizong, surrounded and facing certain capture, committed suicide. The Jin dynasty, which had ruled northern China for over a century, was extinguished. But something far more significant than the fall of one dynasty had occurred at Kaifeng. The technological cat was out of the bag. The Mongols' master adapters, ruthless pragmatists, immediately began incorporating gunpowder weapons into their own arsenal. They didn't just copy the Jin designs, they refined them, experimented with them, integrated them into their combined arms doctrine. Within decades, Mongol armies were deploying gunpowder weapons across their campaigns, and because the Mongol Empire stretched from the Pacific to Eastern Europe, those technologies spread with terrifying speed. Mongol invasions of the Middle East brought gunpowder weapons to Islamic military engineers, who developed their own variations. By the 14th century, knowledge of gunpowder had reached Europe, probably through multiple transmission routes, Mongol contact, Islamic Spain, Silk Road trade networks, European metallurgists and military engineers, always seeking advantages, seized on the technology enthusiastically. By the 15th century, European foundries were casting cannon. By the 16th century, handheld firearms were becoming standard infantry weapons. The thunder crash bomb used at Kaifeng in 1232 was the direct ancestor of the hand grenade that would arm soldiers in World War I. The fragmentation principle pack explosives inside metal. Let the metal shatter into lethal fragments remains unchanged in modern artillery shells, cluster munitions, and improvised explosive devices. The flying fire lance evolved into primitive guns and eventually into modern firearms. Let's talk about contemporary parallels. Because Kaifeng teaches lessons that military forces still learn the hard way. Think about technology disruption. Jin defenders used revolutionary weapons to hold off superior force. Modern every technological surprise. Stinger missiles, Afghan Mujahideen versus Soviet helicopters. IEDs, Iraqi insurgents versus US armor. Drones, Azerbaijan versus Armenia. Ukraine versus Russia. Cheap tech in right hands disrupts expensive systems. Think about the fragmentation weapon evolution. Thunder crash bomb, 1232. Hand grenade, World War I. Artillery shells, cluster bombs, modern IEDs. Modern fragmentation principle unchanged. 800 years. M67 grenade uses same physics metal casing. Explosive fill. Fragments. 155 millimeter artillery shell. Scaled up thunder crash bomb. Principle discovered at Kaifeng dominates battlefield today. Think about flamethrower horror. Fire lance created terror beyond casualties. Modern flamethrowers banned, mostly because psychological impact too severe. Napalm Vietnam. Horrific burns. White phosphorus burns intensely. Psychological weapon. Thermobaric weapons, pressure plus fire. Fire weapons terrorize beyond killing. Think about adaptation speed. Mongols faced new weapons, adapted tactics within months, adopted weapons within years. Modern rapid technological adoption. U.S. captured German tech World War II rockets. Jets. Russia captured German scientists. China reverse engineers Western tech. Iran adapts drone technology. Adaptation determines survival. Think about siege warfare, evolution. Gunpowder weapons changed fortification design forever. Modern castles obsolete by the 1500s, replaced by star forts designed for artillery. Bunkers replaced trenches, World War I. Reactive armor versus shaped charges. Underground tunnels versus airstrikes. Defense adapts to offense. Eternal cycle. Think about mass casualties from new weapons. Thunder crash bomb killed dozens per use. Unprecedented. Modern each technology leap increases lethality. Machine guns, World War I industrial killing. Atomic bombs, instant cities erased. Precision missiles, bunkers destroyed remotely. Chemical weapons, area denial. Lethality increases exponentially with technology. Think about psychological versus physical casualties. Fire lance killed fewer than swords, but terrified more. Modern terror weapons exist. Chemical weapons banned not because lethality, conventional weapons kill more, but because horror. Nuclear weapons, psychological deterrent beyond actual use. Suicide bombs, terror exceeds casualties. Fear is weapon. Think about technology transfer. Mongols learned from Chinese engineers, spread to Middle East, then Europe. Modern technology spreads. Nuclear weapons, US. US Air, UK. France, China, Israel, India, Pakistan, North Korea. Drones, US military to consumer market to militants. Internet, military to civilian. Encryption, NSA to criminals. Can't contain technology long term. Think about defensive technology advantage. Defenders with thunder crash bombs held off superior force. Modern defensive tech favors defenders. Anti-tank missiles, cheap versus expensive tanks. Surface-to-air missiles threaten aircraft. Naval mines threaten ships. Cyber defense versus offense. Defense often cheaper than offense. Think about siege starvation strategy. Subutai couldn't assault. Starved city. Modern siege warfare persists. Sarajevo surrounded 1992 to 1996. Grozny surrounded. Starved. Bombarded. Mariupol besieged 2022. Aleppo siege 2012 to 2000 Starvation. Still used when assault too costly. Think about civilian casualties in siege. Kaifeng lost hundreds of thousands to starvation, disease. Modern siege kills civilians disproportionately. Leningrad, 872 days. Million dead. Mostly starvation. Warsaw Ghetto starvation tactic. Madaya, Syria starvation siege. Tigray, Ethiopia starvation as weapon. Civilians die when cities besieged. Think about plague and siege. Densely packed population. Poor sanitation. Disease spreads. Modern disease in conflict zones. Cholera, Yemen. Haiti post-earthquake. Typhoid refugee camps. COVID, 19 conflict zones vulnerable. War conditions spread disease always. Think about emperor fleeing capital. Aizong abandoned Kaifeng to preserve dynasty. Modern leaders evacuate under pressure. French government fled Paris, 1940. South Vietnamese government fled Saigon, 1975. Afghan government fled Kabul, 2021. Syrian government nearly fled Damascus. Leaders flee when capital untenable. Think about negotiated surrender. General Cui negotiated terms to avoid massacre. Modern surrender negotiations common. Germany, 1945, unconditional. Japan, 1945, preserved emperor. Iraqi army, 1991, negotiated withdrawals. Taliban, 2001, Kunduz airlift negotiated. Terms matter when defeat inevitable. Think about alliance shifts. Mongols allied with Song against Jin, then conquered Song. Modern temporary alliances shift. U.S. armed Mujahideen versus Soviets. Later fought them. U.S. allied with Stalin versus Hitler. Syrian rebel alliances constantly shifted. Alliances opportunistic, temporary. Think about fortification obsolescence. Gunpowder made high walls vulnerable. Modern each weapon makes previous defense obsolete. Castles, star forts, bunkers, underground facilities, deep bunkers. Armor, reactive armor, composite. Constant evolution. Think about combined arms integration. Mongols used cavalry, Ziga engines, infantry, gunpowder weapons together. Modern combined arms essential. Infantry, armor, artillery, air, cyber, space. Ukraine combines drones, artillery, infantry, cyber. Desert Storm combined air, ground, naval. Integration multiplies effectiveness. Think about technological diffusion timeline. Gunpowder weapons, 1232. China, 1300s. Middle East, 1400s. Europe. Centuries. Modern diffusion accelerated. Nuclear weapons, 1945, 1949, USSR. Drones military to commercial years, not decades. Internet, military to global decades. Stealth tech, US exclusive decades. Now, China. Russia developing. Diffusion faster, but still happens. Think about weapon development secrecy. Jin tried keeping Thunder crash bombs secret. Modern weapons programs classified. Manhattan Project, total secrecy. Stealth aircraft, developed secretly. Cyber weapons, NSA tools, secret until leaked. Nuclear programs Israel. North Korea covert. Secrecy attempts, always temporary. Think about improvised weapons. Jin engineers improvised fragmentation weapons from available materials. Modern IEDs improvised from fertilizer. Artillery shells. Commercial explosives. Syrian barrel bombs. Industrial cylinders plus explosives. Chechen IEDs. Creative designs. Yemen Houthi drones commercial parts. Improvisation constant in warfare. Think about morale under bombardment. Kaifeng population endured year plus of siege. Modern civilian morale under bombardment varies. London blitz morale erhält. Dresden firestorm broke resistance. Grozny resistance continued despite devastation. Gaza bombarded repeatedly. Morale, resilience, unpredictable, context dependent. Think about supply line importance. Mongols cut Kaifeng supplies. City doomed. Modern logistics determines outcome. Berlin airlift broke Soviet blockade. Stalingrad surrounded Germans couldn't resupply. Afghanistan U.S. relied on air supply. Yemen Saudi blockade causes famine. Cut supplies. Win VAR. Think about technological surprise. Mongols, unprepared for fragmentation weapons. Modern surprise weapons shock. German tanks, 1,940. French, unprepared. Japanese kamikaze, U.S. unprepared. Iraqi insurgent tactics, U.S. initially unprepared. Hezbollah anti-tank Israeli, surprise 2006. Expect unexpected. Think about veteran force preservation. Subutai wouldn't waste veterans assaulting walls. Modern experienced soldiers valuable. U.S. rotates troops to preserve force. Russia losing experienced troops Ukraine can't easily replace. Israeli reserves experienced critical. Afghan National Army experienced fled. Green soldiers surrendered. Veterans irreplaceable. Think about siege duration. Kaifeng, 13 plus months before surrender. Modern long sieges persist. Sarajevo, 1,425 days. Leningrad, 872 days. Aleppo, years long. Stalingrad, months. Time in siege warfare measured months, years. Patience required. Think about disease as weapon. Plague killed thousands at Kaifeng. Modern biological warfare threat. Anthrax letters, 2001. Soviet bioweapons program. Japanese Unit 731. COVID-19 pulgada, conflict zones. Disease is weapon or unintended consequence of war conditions. Think about escalation cycle. Mongols developed siege weapons. Jin developed gunpowder weapons. Mongols adopted those. Modern arms race. Nuclear weapons, U.S. USSR buildup. Precision weapons, U.S. advantage. Others catching up. Cyber weapons, offensive, defensive race. AI weapons developing now. Action provokes reaction infinitely. Think about refugee crisis. Kaifeng population fled before siege. Packed city. Modern war creates refugees. Syria, millions displaced. Ukraine, millions fled. Afghanistan, decades of displacement. Yemen, humanitarian crisis. Rwanda, millions fled genocide. Refugees are war consequence. Think about urban warfare cost. Assaulting defended cities, extremely costly. Modern urban combat, deadliest. Stalingrad, house-to-house fighting, horrific casualties. Fallujah, intense urban combat. Grozny city destroyed in fighting. Mosul, months to retake. City ruined. Mariupol, devastating urban Zeke. Cities are fortresses, naturally. Think about fire as psychological weapon. Fire lance terrified beyond physical damage. Modern incendiary weapons, psychological. Napalm burns horrifically. White phosphorus burns underwater. Thermobaric weapons, pressure wave plus fire. Fire produces unique horror, even when other weapons kill more efficiently. Think about the intelligence failure. Mongols didn't know about thunder crash bombs beforehand. Modern intelligence gaps costly. Iraqi WMDs assumed present. Wrong. Afghan resistance underestimated. Ukrainian resistance underestimated. Chinese capabilities often underestimated or overestimated. Intelligence failures lead to strategic mistakes. Think about fortification investment. Jin built massive walls, invested in defense. Modern defensive infrastructure, expensive but necessary. Maginot Line bypassed, but concept sound. Israeli barriers reduce infiltration. Korean DMZ prevents invasion. Ukraine fortifications slowed Russian advances. Static defense has role. Think about gunpowder storage risks. Storing explosives inherently dangerous. Modern ammunition depot explosions. Beirut, 2020 ammonium nitrate explosion. Massive casualties. Russian ammunition depots. Ukraine drone strikes. Serbian ammunition factory explosion. Explosive storage is vulnerability. Think about the technological leap timing. Gunpowder known centuries. Weaponized effectively at Kaifeng. Modern technology adoption lag. Tanks invented World War I. Decisive World War II. Drones existed decades. Military game changer recently. Nuclear power, 1940s. Still controversial. AI, decades old. Recently transformative. Technology exists before optimal application. Think about dual-use technology. Gunpowder used fireworks and weapons. Modern most technology dual use. GPS, military and civilian. Internet, military, then civilian. Drones, commercial and military. Encryption, privacy, and criminal. Facial recognition, security and surveillance. Technology is tool. Use determines good, evil. Think about resource exhaustion. Kaifeng ran out of food, surrendered. Modern resource depletion ends resistance. Germany, World War II fuel shortages crippled. Japan oil embargo forced decisions. ISIS lost oil revenue, weakened. Yemen fuel shortages humanitarian crisis. Resources determine sustainability. Think about propaganda value. Jin resistance against Mongols inspired others. Modern resistance propaganda. Warsaw Uprising inspired despite failure. Vietnam resistance. Global anti-war movement. Ukrainian resistance, Western support. Palestinian resistance, Middle East support. Resistance has propaganda value beyond military outcome. Think about treaty violations. Promised safety, then enslaved, killed repeatedly in warfare. Modern war crimes. Geneva Conventions, violations common. Prisoner mistreatment, Abu Ghraib. Guantanamo. Civilian targeting many conflicts. Siege, starvation, International law violation still happens. Rules exist. Enforcement difficult. Think about capital city symbolism. Kaifeng Fall didn't end Jin, but wounded prestige. Modern capitals, symbolic. Berlin, 1945 Nazi Germany, ended. Saigon, 1975 South Vietnam, ended. Kabul, 2021 Afghan government, ended. Baghdad, 2003 Saddam regime, ended, though resistance continued. Capital fall is psychological blow. Think about defensive innovation. Jin innovated under pressure of Mongol invasion. Modern pressure drives innovation. Radar World War II necessity. Jet engines World War II arms race. GPS Cold War military need. Internet DARPA project. Stealth counter Soviet air defense. Necessity breeds invention. Think about fragmentation, weapons banned efforts. Thunder crash bomb descendants like cluster munitions controversial. Modern cluster bomb bans attempted. Convention on cluster munitions many nations signed. Major militaries haven't. Landmines, Ottawa Treaty. Major powers unsigned. Chemical weapons banned. Still used, sometimes. Banning weapons difficult when militarily useful. Think about siege warfare laws. Starvation of civilians controversial. Even in 1232, modern international humanitarian law prohibits siege starvation. Still used. Geneva Conventions. Additional protocol. One prohibits starvation. Yet Syria, Yemen, other conflicts use starvation. Law and practice diverge in war. Think about technology reverse engineering. Mongols captured Jin weapons, copied them. Modern reverse engineering constant. Soviet Tu-4 reverse engineered B-29. Chinese J-11 reverse engineered Su-27. Iran reverse engineers captured U.S. drones. North Korea reverse engineers missiles. Capturing technology accelerates adversary capabilities. Think about environmental factors. Summer heat. Winter, cold-affected siege. Modern weather matters still. Russian winter, historical, German, French failures. Desert heat affects operations Iraq, Afghanistan. Monsoon Vietnam operations affected. Arctic new concern with climate change. Environment is constant factor. Think about the cascading failures. Food shortage, disease, morale collapse, surrender. Modern cascading failures common. Economic crisis, political instability, conflict, drought, famine, migration, conflict, pandemic economic crisis unrest. Systems, interconnected. One failure triggers others. Think about last stand psychology. Some Kaifeng defenders fought to death. Others surrendered. Modern last stands vary. Alamo fought to death. Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, despite hopelessness. Japanese World War II, often fought to death. German, 1945. Some units fought. Others surrendered. ISIS, some surrendered. Others suicide. Context determines last stand decisions. Think about multi-year conflicts. Jin-Mongol War lasted 21 plus years. Modern long wars common. Vietnam-US involved decade plus. Afghanistan-US 20 years. Soviet 10 years. Syrian war decade plus. Yemen ongoing years. Iraq 2003 to 2011 main U.S. involvement. Insurgency continued. Wars are long. Patience required. Think about total war. Mongols willing to destroy entire populations. Modern total war rare but remembered. World War II. Strategic bombing of civilians. Atomic bombs, instant cities destroyed. Rwanda, genocide, 800,000 killed months. ISIS genocide, Yazidis targeted. Total war is existential threat. Think about hybrid warfare. Mongols used cavalry. Ziga, psychological warfare. Gunpowder weapons. Modern hybrid warfare concept. Russia, Ukraine, conventional plus cyber plus propaganda plus economic. China military plus economic plus cyber plus space. Iran proxies plus missiles plus cyber. Hezbollah, guerrilla plus missiles plus political. Multi-domain operations are norm. Think about civilian-military distinction blurring. Kaifeng had million civilians, 40,000 defenders. All suffered. Modern civilians in war zones suffered disproportionately. Dresden firestorm killed tens of thousands civilians. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, primarily civilian casualties. Syrian barrel bombs, indiscriminate. Gaza civilians trapped in combat zone. Distinction between combatant, civilian erodes in siege, urban warfare. Think about historical amnesia. Jin resistance at Kaifeng, largely forgotten in West. Modern most wars forgotten. Korean War, forgotten war in U.S. Iran-Iraq War, million dead, barely remembered. Congo Wars, millions dead, little coverage. Yemen ongoing humanitarian crisis, limited attention. Media, attention, selective, most suffering invisible. Think about infrastructure destruction. Kaifeng damage during siege. Modern infrastructure targeting. World War II industrial centers destroyed. NATO-Serbia power grids. Bridges targeted. Iraq infrastructure destroyed 1,991. 2003. Syria hospitals. Schools deliberately targeted. Ukraine power grid targeted winter. Infrastructure is target. Think about war profiteering. Someone sold food at inflated prices during Kaifeng siege. Modern war profiteering, constant. Defense contractors profit from conflicts. Reconstruction contracts, Iraq. Afghanistan. Arms sales fueling conflicts. Mercenaries, PMCs like Wagner. Blackwater. War is business for some. Think about cultural destruction. Cities besieged often lose cultural heritage. Modern heritage sites destroyed. Palmyra, ISIS destroyed ancient ruins. Aleppo World Heritage Site damaged. Timbuktu, manuscripts destroyed. Yemen, historic sites bombed. Mosul, ancient sites destroyed. War destroys history physically. Think about medical challenges. Plague spread and siege conditions. Modern medical care in conflict zones. Syrian hospitals targeted systematically. Yemen cholera outbreak from poor sanitation. Afghanistan healthcare system collapsed. Ukraine medical system strained by war. Conflict degrades healthcare when most needed. Think about leadership decisions under pressure. Emperor Aizong fled to preserve dynasty. Modern leaders make hard choices. Churchill fight on versus negotiate. Zelensky stay in Kiev versus evacuate. Syrian leaders varied responses to Arab Spring. Afghan leaders fled versus stayed. Leadership under existential threat reveals character. Think about defensive innovation, desperation. Jinn developed weapons because existentially threatened. Modern desperation drives innovation. Israeli military technology constant existential threat. Ukrainian drone innovation invaded. Had to innovate. Chechen improvised tactics faced superior force. Necessity is mother of invention. Think about urban population vulnerability. Million-plus people trapped, couldn't escape. Modern urban warfare traps civilians. Mosul civilians trapped during battle. Aleppo civilians besieged years. Mariupol civilians couldn't evacuate safely. Gaza, dense population, nowhere safe. Urban density magnifies civilian suffering. Think about siege engine evolution. Trebuchets versus gunpowder weapons. Modern each era has siege weapons. World War II, heavy artillery. Modern precision missiles. Bunker busters penetrate hardened targets. Thermobaric bombs cave complexes. Weapons evolve. Purpose, same breach defenses. Think about metallurgy, military importance. Cast iron-enabled fragmentation weapons. Modern materials, science drives weapons. Armor steel, to composite, to reactive. Aircraft aluminum to composites to stealth materials. Reactive armor shaped charge defeat. Materials science is military advantage. Think about gunpowder composition refinement. Sulfur charcoal saltpeter ratios critical. Modern chemistry determines munitions. TNT more stable than gunpowder. RDX more powerful. PETN extremely sensitive. Semtex plastic explosive. Chemistry advances increase lethality. Think about weapons testing under combat. Jinn tested thunder crash bombs against Mongols. Learned. Improved. Modern combat testing reveals flaws. F-35 combat tested Syria. Issues found. Javelin Ukraine combat proved effectiveness. Israeli Iron Dome combat proven. Refined. Abrams tank continual combat refinement. Combat is ultimate test. Think about asymmetric warfare. Weaker Jinn used tech to offset Mongol superiority. Modern weaker forces use asymmetry. Vietnam guerrilla tactics versus U.S. firepower. Afghanistan IEDs versus U.S. armor. Ukraine drones versus Russian armor. Hezbollah anti-tank versus Israeli tanks. Asymmetry is equalizer. Think about fortification, design, philosophy. Chinese walls versus Mongol mobility. Modern fixed versus mobile defense debate. Maginot Line bypassed. Border walls controversial effectiveness. Israeli security barrier reduces infiltration. Ukrainian fortifications slowed Russia. Fixed defenses have limitations, but still useful. Think about command structure adaptation. Subutai adapted to new weapons. Modern adaptive leadership critical. Petraeus, Iraq surge. Adapted tactics. Israeli commanders adapt constantly. Ukrainian command innovating real time. Russian command struggled to adapt. Adaptation determines success. Think about medical innovation from warfare. Gunpowder wounds required new treatments. Modern war drives medical advances. Triage, Napoleonic Wars. Antibiotics. World War I, World War II drove development. Trauma, surgery, war, experience improves. Prosthetics improved for more wounded. PTSD treatment, war necessity. Medicine advances from treating war casualties. Think about psychological warfare. Fire lance created terror. Modern psychological operations. Loudspeaker broadcasts Korea. Vietnam. Radio propaganda, World War II. Social media, ISIS. Ukraine. Deepfakes, emerging threat. Information warfare is psychological. Think about the starvation ethics. Deliberate civilian starvation, controversial even 800 years ago. Modern starvation as weapon condemned. Holodomor Stalin's Ukraine starvation. North Korea famine partly deliberate. Yemen blockade causes famine. Siege starvation, international law violation. Ethics haven't changed. Practice persists. Think about historical sources, reliability. Chinese records detailed, but winner biased. Modern historical records always biased. Vietnam War, U.S. and Vietnamese accounts differ. Iraq War justifications disputed. Syrian War, each side different narrative. History, written by someone, always perspective involved. Think about refugee absorption. Kaifeng absorbed refugees, worsened siege conditions. Modern refugee crises strain resources. Jordan, Syrian refugees, economic burden. Turkey, millions of Syrian refugees. Lebanon refugee population destabilizing. Uganda refugee hospitality despite poverty. Refugees are humanitarian challenge. Think about siege tunneling. Mongol mining versus Jin, countermining. Modern tunnel warfare persists. Gaza extensive tunnel network. Korean DMZ suspected tunnels. Vietnam, Cu Chi tunnels. Mexico border cartel tunnels. Underground warfare is constant. Think about explosive expertise requirements. Jin needed skilled engineers for Thunder crash bombs. Modern explosives, expertise valuable and dangerous. IED makers hunted by intelligence. Nuclear scientists closely monitored. Chemical weapons experts restricted. Cyber hackers recruited or prosecuted. Expertise is double-edged. Think about weapons proliferation control. Can't control gunpowder. Knowledge once spread. Modern proliferation impossible to stop completely. Nuclear NPT limits spread. Doesn't eliminate. Chemical banned. Still produced. Biological dual-use research. Cyber weapons code is knowledge. Knowledge spreads. Control illusory. Think about morale versus technology. Demoralized defenders surrendered despite having superior weapons. Modern morale matters more than equipment. Afghan National Army better equipped than Taliban. Collapsed. South Vietnamese U.S. equipment. Lost will. Iraqi army fled from ISIS despite superiority. Morale is greater than technology. Think about the siege supply challenges. Feeding million-plus people impossible under blockade. Modern humanitarian access in siege. Sarajevo UN convoys. Aleppo aid blocked as weapon. Yemen port blockades cause famine. Gaza border closures restrict aid. Humanitarian access is weapon. Think about terror weapon effectiveness. Thunder crash bombs terrified Mongols beyond actual casualties. Modern terror weapons are psychological. Suicide bombs, terror exceeds death toll. Chemical weapons, horror beyond lethality. Nuclear threats, fear of use. Terrorism terrorized disproportionate to physical damage. Psychology is battlefield. Think about battlefield innovation, speed. Jinn developed weapons during war, deployed immediately. Modern innovation in conflict accelerated. Ukraine drone tactics evolving weekly. ISIS VBIED tactics refined constantly. Israel tactics updated after each engagement. Combat accelerates innovation cycles. Think about combined siege tactics. Bombardment plus mining plus starvation plus disease. Modern multi-pronged siege. Syria bombing plus starvation plus disease. Yemen blockade plus bombing plus disease. Grozny artillery plus armor plus infantry. Sarajevo snipers plus artillery plus blockade. Effective siege uses all available methods. Think about negotiation under duress. General Kui negotiated from position of weakness. Modern weak position negotiations difficult. Taliban negotiated from strength, Afghanistan. Ukrainian negotiating while defending. Syrian rebels negotiated while losing. ISIS refused negotiation until destroyed. Negotiating position determines outcome. Think about leadership continuity. Emperor fled, but dynasty continued briefly. Modern government continuity, important. Afghan government collapsed when leaders fled. Syrian government maintained continuity despite pressure. Ukrainian government maintained continuity, stayed in capital. Continuity is legitimacy. Think about siege breakout attempts. Some defenders tried escaping Kaifeng. Modern breakout operations. Stalingrad German breakout failed. Bastogne U.S. held until relieved. Kherson defended until relieved. Debaltseve Ukrainian forces broke out. Breakout is last resort when relief impossible. Think about weapon terror factor decay. Initial shock of thunder crash bombs wore off as Mongols adapted. Modern terror weapons lose impact over time. Shock and awe, initial impact, then adaptation. Drones initially terrifying, now routine. IEDs initially shocking, then expected. Adaptation is inevitable. Think about artillery evolution. Thunder crash bombs, cannon modern artillery, precision missiles. Modern artillery still battlefield king. Ukraine artillery dominant. World War I artillery caused most casualties. World War II artillery critical. Modern HIMARS, howitzers, MLRs. Artillery concept unchanged. Precision improved. Think about siege warfare documentation. Chinese historians recorded Kaifeng in detail. Modern conflicts documented extensively. World War II extensively documented. Filmed. Vietnam televised war. Iraq, Afghanistan documented. Leaked. Ukraine documented real-time social media. Documentation level unprecedented. Think about multi-generational warfare. Jin-Mongol War outlasted individual leaders. Modern long conflicts span generations. Israel-Palestine decades. Multiple generations. Kashmir, generations of conflict. Cyprus divided generations. Colombia-FARC conflict, 50-plus years. Some conflicts outlast participants. Think about technological surprise mitigation. After Kaifeng, Mongols prepared for gunpowder weapons. Modern countermeasures developed. Armor versus anti-tank, reactive armor, developed. Aircraft versus SAM, electronic warfare. Stealth, ships versus missiles, CIWS. Decoys. Cyber attacks versus defense, constant evolution. Each weapon spawns countermeasure. Think about siege logistics requirements. Mongols needed 87 kilometers of siege lines supplied. Modern logistics is everything. Berlin airlift sustained city by air. Stalingrad, both sides struggled with supply. Afghanistan, everything flown in for US. Ukraine logistics determines operations. Supply chain is foundation. Think about urban combat lessons. Kaifeng siege informed future urban warfare. Modern urban warfare principles established. Stalingrad house-to-house template. Hughes City Urban Combat Study. Fallujah, modern urban warfare. Mosul Iraqi forces learned urban tactics. Grozny Russian relearned cost. Urban warfare most costly. Think about desperation weapons. Jin developed thunder crash bombs from desperation. Modern desperation drives innovation. Vietnamese booby traps. Tunnels versus US. Chechen improvised tactics versus Russia. ISIS beats. Drones, dropped grenades. Ukrainian sea drones. Modified agricultural drones. Desperation is mother of innovation. Think about historical weapons reevaluation. Gunpowder weapons seemed primitive, became dominant. Modern dismissed weapons sometimes matter. Drones dismissed as toys, now crucial. Cyber initially underestimated, now domain of war. Hypersonics, developing, may reshape warfare. Technologies dismissed become game changers. Think about fortification weapon cycles. Better walls, better siege weapons, better walls. Modern offense-defense cycle. Tank, anti-tank. Reactive armor, advanced anti-tank. Aircraft SAM, stealth advanced SAM. Network, cyber attack, cyber defense, advanced attacks. Eternal cycle, offense, defense. Think about coalition warfare challenges. Mongol Song Alliance against Jin. Then Mongols fought Song. Modern coalitions are temporary. U.S.-Soviet Allied World War II. Cold War enemies. U.S. Islamist Allied versus Soviets, Afghanistan. Later fought. U.S.-Iraq allies versus Iran. Later fought. Northern Alliance U.S. Allied Afghanistan. Tensions after. Alliances shift with interests. Think about technological documentation. Jin kept records of thunder crash bombs. Knowledge preserved. Modern technical documentation crucial. Manhattan Project extensively documented. Apollo program preserved knowledge. Stealth aircraft closely guarded documentation. Cyber weapons often leaked documentation. Document or lose knowledge. Think about siege relief operations. No relief came for Kaifeng. Modern relief operations determine sieges. Stalingrad. Soviet relief broke siege. Kherson. U.S. relief by ground, air. Baston Patton, relieved. Deir ez-Zor Syrian government, relieved. Relief is hope. Absence is doom. Think about war exhaustion. 21-year war exhausted Jin dynasty. Modern long wars exhaust nations. Soviet-Afghanistan economic exhaustion contributed to collapse. U.S.-Vietnam, domestic exhaustion, forced withdrawal. U.S.-Afghanistan, 20 years. Exhaustion. Ottoman World War I, exhausted. Empire collapsed. Long wars test endurance. Think about surprise weapon deployment secrecy. Jin kept thunder crash bombs secret until used. Modern secret weapons revealed in combat. Stealth aircraft revealed Desert Storm. Cyber weapons Stuxnet revealed capabilities. Hypersonic missiles revealed, when tested, used. Secret until deployed. Think about civilian shelter during siege. Kaifeng population had nowhere safe. Modern civilian shelters critical. London tube stations, World War II. Sarajevo basements during siege. Gaza UNRWA schools used as shelters. Ukraine, metro stations, basements. Shelter is life-saving. Think about the ammunition expenditure. Thunder crash bombs, resource-intensive. Modern ammunition consumption enormous. World War I, millions of shells. World War II exceeded World War I. Ukraine ammunition shortages both sides. Artillery consumes ammunition faster than production. Expenditure is constraint. Think about morale operations. Jin defenders needed morale maintained despite conditions. Modern morale sustainment critical. World War II, entertainment for troops. Vietnam USO shows. Iraq, Afghanistan morale programs. Ukraine cultural events despite war. Morale maintenance is necessity. Think about enemy capability assessment. Mongols underestimated Jin weapons initially. Modern capability estimates critical and often wrong. Iraqi army, 1,991, overestimated. Taliban underestimated. Chinese capabilities debated constantly. North Korean capabilities unclear. Assessment errors lead to strategic mistakes. Think about technological leapfrogging. Jin skipped intermediate weapons development, went straight to fragmentation. Modern leapfrogging happens. China skipped some tech generations, developed advanced systems. African nations skipped landlines, went mobile. India's space program advanced, despite development level. Leapfrogging possible with knowledge transfer. Think about scorched earth tactics. Mongols denied Jin supplies by destroying countryside. Modern scorched earth persists. Russian retreat, 1,812. 1,941 burned everything. Iraqi oil fires 1,991. Syrian fields burned. Environmental damage is warfare tactic. Think about siege disease control. Impossible to prevent disease spread in Kaifeng conditions. Modern disease in conflict zones inevitable. Cholera Yemen, Haiti. Typhoid refugee camps. Ebola, DRC, conflict zones, complicated response. COVID, 19 conflicciones vulnerable. War conditions breed disease. Think about historical contingency. If Jin had thunder crash bombs earlier, maybe different outcome. Modern timing matters. German atomic bomb, if developed earlier. World War II different. Stealth aircraft, if developed earlier. Cold War different. Penicillin, if available. World War I. Fewer deaths. Timing of innovation determines impact. Think about siege negotiation tactics. General Cui negotiated best terms possible. Modern negotiating under pressure is art. Korean armistice negotiated while fighting continued. Vietnam, Paris negotiated while bombing continued. Syrian evacuations negotiated under fire. Minsk agreements negotiated Ukraine. Negotiation under fire is difficult. Think about weapons testing ethics. Thunder crash bombs tested on humans in combat. Modern weapons testing on humans is war crime, but combat is testing. White phosphorus tested Syria. Chemical weapons tested Syria. New munitions, Ukraine is testing ground. Combat reveals weapon effectiveness regardless of ethics. Think about the memory of innovation. Thunder crash bomb remembered as Chinese invention. Modern weapons attributed to inventors. AK-47 Kalashnikov remembered. Atomic bomb Manhattan Project remembered. Stinger missile remembered for Afghanistan. Innovations are remembered with inventors, first use. Think about defensive psychology. Knowing relief wasn't coming, defenders still fought. Modern hopeless defense psychology varies. Alamo fought to death, knowing no relief. Masada suicide rather than surrender. Warsaw Ghetto uprising despite hopelessness. Japanese islands World War II fought despite hopelessness. Some fight regardless, others surrender. Context determines. Think about siege duration calculation. How long can supplies last? When to surrender? Modern. Besieged. Calculate endurance. Stalingrad Germans calculated couldn't hold. Sarajevo defenders calculated could outlast. Aleppo rebels eventually depleted. Mariupol calculated when to surrender sectors. Math of siege is calories. Ammunition. Will, Think about post-siege reconstruction. Kaifeng took decades to recover. Modern post-war reconstruction long. Germany Marshall Plan. Decades. Japan decades to recover. Syria decades to recover likely. Afghanistan minimal reconstruction. Iraq reconstruction incomplete. Destruction is quick. Rebuilding is generations. Think about historical sources bias. Chinese sources detailed, but pro-dynasty. Modern every source is biased. U.S. military after-action reports, optimistic. Russian sources casualty figures suspect. Syrian sources, each side different story. WikiLeaks revealed classification hides embarrassment. All sources have bias. Triangulation necessary. Think about the weapons trade after conflict. Mongols took Jin weapons. Sold knowledge. Modern weapons trade is massive. Post-Soviet weapons flooded market. Afghanistan, weapons to Pakistan. Elsewhere. Libya weapons spread after Gaddafi. Syria, weapons to multiple actors. Conflict zones are weapon sources. Think about siege psychological operations. Mongols tried demoralizing Kaifeng defenders. Modern psyops constant in Siga. Leaflets dropped on surrounded forces. Radio broadcasts Sarajevo, Aleppo. Social media, Ukraine, Syria. Loudspeakers, Korea, Vietnam. Psychological pressure is siege component. Think about tactical innovation necessity. Jin had to innovate to survive Mongols. Modern innovation or die. Ukrainian tactics innovating constantly versus Russia. Israeli tactics constant adaptation versus threats. U.S. military Afghanistan adaptation. Innovation is survival mechanism when facing superior force or existential threat. Think about weapon proliferation consequences. Gunpowder spread changed warfare globally forever. Modern proliferation consequences. Nuclear weapons world lives with proliferation risk. Cyber weapons proliferated. No control. Drones commercial. Military. Terrorist use. Chemical weapons banned. Still appear. Once invented. Weapons proliferate regardless of intentions. Think about siege surrender timing. Too early loses honor. Too late, everyone dies. Modern surrender timing is calculation. German, 1945. Some surrendered early. Some fought to last. Japanese, 1945. Surrender after atomic bombs. Iraqi units, 1991. Some surrendered early. Some fought. ISIS fighters fought to death, mostly versus some surrendered. Timing determines casualties. Think about historical analogy limits. Kaifeng teaches lessons, but context different. Modern analogies are imperfect. Vietnam lessons misapply to Iraq, Afghanistan. World War II analogies to modern conflicts, imperfect. Cold War analogies to current conflicts, limited. Historical lessons are guides, not blueprints. Context always matters. Think about the engineering warfare. Mining, counter-mining, fortification. Modern engineering is warfare. Combat engineers clear obstacles, build fortifications. Seabees build bases under fire. Bunker complexes North Korea. Hezbollah. Hamas. Engineering shapes battlefield. Think about ammunition, storage, security. Jinn, stored gunpowder, vulnerable to catastrophic explosion. Modern ammunition storage is vulnerability in target. Beirut, 2020, stored ammonium nitrate exploded. Russian depots targeted by Ukraine drones. Israeli strikes target Hezbollah. Iranian ammunition. Storing munitions is risk. Think about weapon miniaturization. Thunder crash bomb large. Later weapons smaller. Modern miniaturization trend. Nuclear weapons city-size to backpack claimed. Drones large to tiny. Computers room-size to pocket. Explosives more powerful in smaller packages. Miniaturization continues. Think about cultural memory of conflict. Kaifeng Siege remembered in Chinese history. Modern conflicts scar collective memory. British World War II Blitz remembered. Russian World War II Great Patriotic War central identity. Vietnamese-American War shapes identity. Jewish Holocaust central to identity. Conflicts define nations' self-understanding. Think about leadership under siege. Leaders must maintain morale despite hopeless situation. Modern siege leadership difficult. Churchill rallied British during Blitz. Leningrad leadership maintained defense. Sarajevo leadership kept city functioning. Mariupol leadership coordinated defense. Leadership under siege tests character. Think about siege warfare evolution. Kaifeng siege methods still recognizable today. Modern siege principles unchanged. Surround, cut supplies, bombard, wait, or assault. Technology changes, principles persist. Sarajevo, Grozny, Aleppo, Mariupol, same principles. Modern weapons. Siege warfare is ancient, current, and future. Think about the defender advantage erosion. High walls helped Jinn initially. Gunpowder later defeated walls. Modern defensive advantages, temporary. Maginot Line, bypassed. Armor defeated by better anti-tank. Stealth countered by better radar eventually. Cyber defense breached constantly. Every defense has eventual counter. Think about dual-purpose manufacturing. Facilities making thunder crash bombs vulnerable targets. Modern dual-use facilities complicate targeting. Iranian nuclear sites, civilian power or weapons. Syrian chemical facilities, legitimate or weapons. Ukrainian infrastructure, civilian or military. Dual use makes targeting decisions difficult. Think about weapon effectiveness documentation. How many thunder crash bombs used? Casualties caused. Modern battle damage assessment. Critical but difficult. Airstrikes, BDA, often inaccurate. Artillery hard to assess damage. Cyber attacks, damage assessment, classified. Effectiveness, often unknown or disputed. Think about historical technological determinism. Did thunder crash bombs determine outcome? Modern technology doesn't determine wars alone. Vietnam, U.S. tech superiority, lost war. Afghanistan, NATO tech superiority, Taliban won. Iraq, high tech, messy outcome. Think about the final lesson of the Siege of Kaifeng, 1232. Technology is factor, not determinant. Will, strategy, politics matter more. Revolutionary technology can change battlefield tactics, but doesn't guarantee strategic victory. Jin Dynasty had superior weapons: thunder, crash bombs, fire lances that terrified the most successful military force in history. Mongols genuinely feared these weapons according to historical records. Jin defenders killed thousands of Mongols, held the siege over a year. Revolutionary, game-changing, insufficient, because tactics are not strategy. Technology is not victory. Weapons don't defeat nations' economics. Logistics, alliances, will defeat nations. Jin had better weapons. Mongols had better strategy, more resources, larger manpower base, more allies, more will to continue despite casualties. Jin won battles with revolutionary weapons. Mongols won the war. Thunder Crash Bomb teaches that innovation matters enormously for tactical advantage, but strategic factors determine wars. Modern Confirmation Germany, World War II, innovative tanks, tactics, weapons, lost war, outnumbered, out-resourced, outproduced. Japan, World War II, innovative carrier warfare, torpedoes, initially successful. Lost war, couldn't replace losses. Smaller industrial base. Iraq, innovative tactics against Iran. Lost economic war of attrition. ISIS, innovative social media. Tactics. Lost to coalition. Taliban, low-tech. Won through patience. Technology is tool. Strategy is victory. Kaifeng also teaches, once invented, weapons proliferate unstoppably. Jin tried keeping thunder crash bombs secret. Mongols captured them, reverse-engineered them, adopted them. Within decades, spread to Middle East. Century Europe had gunpowder weapons. Centuries dominated global warfare. Modern parallel nuclear weapons, U.S. exclusive, 4 years. Cyber weapons leaked or stolen constantly. Stealth technology, China developing after decades, U.S. exclusive. Drones, commercial technology enabling military applications. Can't keep weapons secret long-term. Knowledge spreads. Technology proliferates. Today's advantage is tomorrow's common capability. Kaifeng teaches fragmentation weapons principle that dominates warfare 800 years later. Thunder crash bomb physics, explosive inside metal casing. Pressure builds. Casing shatters. Fragments kill. Same physics. World War I, hand grenades. World War II, artillery shells. Modern cluster munitions. IEDs, Iraq, Afghanistan. Every fragmentation weapon uses principle discovered at Kaifeng. We've made them more powerful, better explosives, more precise guided munitions, more deadly improved fragmentation design. Principle unchanged. The genius who developed Thunder Crash Bomb at Kaifeng in 1232 name lost to history. Probably multiple engineers created weapon that killed millions across 800 years of subsequent warfare. Unintended consequences, couldn't imagine modern artillery. Created tool. Others weaponized it globally. If this story changed how you see weapons innovation, subscribe to Map Room Battles. Comment, is technological innovation in warfare inevitable? Thanks for exploring this crucial moment in military history with us. Remember, innovation changes tactics. Strategy wins wars. Kai Feng proved you can have revolutionary weapons and still lose if strategic fundamentals are wrong. Jin had best weapons. Mongols had better strategy, resources, allies, patience. Strategy is greater than technology. Always. But also remember, innovation spreads. Thunder, crash bombs, 1,232, hand grenades, 1915 artillery shells throughout. Innovation at Kaifeng killed at Verdun. Summit, Iwo Jima, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, Ukraine. One invention, endless casualties. Every weapon's innovation has consequences beyond initial use. Creates capabilities that proliferate, persist, kill across centuries. The genius at Kaifeng, who put gunpowder in cast iron, changed warfare forever. Made siege warfare deadlier. Made assault more costly. Eventually, made fortifications obsolete. Led to cannons, firearms, modern artillery. Changed how humans kill each other. That's the weight of innovation. Technology spreads. Applications multiply. Consequences ripple through history. Kaifeng's siege introduced fragmentation weapons to warfare. World has been fragmenting ever since.